Hello, this is Jory from Tagged Out Taxidermy. I got a lot going on in my shop today, but one thing I'm working on is a bear rug. I thought I would go ahead and show you how I set my eyes and prep my form and everything. Actually, this form has already been prepped, but I'll show you a form that hasn't, and I'll show you what I've done to this that isn't like the other one. What I've done is I've put a replacement nose on this. So this is an artificial nose that I've casted myself. The reason I like to use a cast nose is one thing is they're easy to put on, and the nose looks phenomenal when you're done. You barely have to paint it. I always pre-paint mine. I'll have to come back and kind of touch it up. You can see on this particular one that it's gotten a little scuffed up here and there, but the detail in the nostril and everything is phenomenal. So I can cast these myself. I got a mold all made up, and it takes me no time to cast one, and it saves me money. But also it's kind of my own little touch on my mounts. It's something that I have created myself. And they're super simple to put on. So I went ahead and did that. Now the lip, you can see on this form, is just plain foam lip. I don't have any artificial lip line or anything on there. They call them a mouth cup, which I ordered this form knowing that I was going to use the real lips. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'll use the real lips up to this point here, and then I'll go ahead and let them dry, and I usually cut them off and sculpt them in. I like doing that a little bit better. It's, as far as time, it's cost me a little bit more time to do it, but I really like that aspect of taxidermy, being able to sculpt things. Eventually I'd like to have my own mouth cup casted, and I'm working on that, but I haven't quite finished it. So what I did with this form is by using a reference photo, I went ahead and marked this out with a marker, and I carved all my detail in. And you can see this form is made by the same company. I believe it's the same sculptor even. But you can see how the detail in it is very vague. That could be distortion from when they pulled it out of the mold, or when they actually built the mold for it. Maybe there was some uneven areas. And what I did was I came through and I put in my detail. I like to use needle files, or I like to use a bigger file like this, and then I also use sandpaper a lot. The only time I use a stout rougher on the face of a form is, on a form, is usually on the back, where I'm not too worried about the detail. I really like to have my face, though, smooth and consistent. By carving this detail into it, not only am I getting detail, but I'm creating a rough spot for my glue to stick. If you don't create a good rough spot for your glue to stick, the glue is not going to adhere to anything. This is just like a wax coating. You can see, as I scrape my finger on it, flakes of the wax is actually coming off. So that's really important to do, is make sure that you have an area for the glue to stick. Now, I'm to a point now where I need to set my eyes. So what I did was I got an eye that's just a little bit bigger, maybe 1 or 2 millimeters bigger than the form. I like a bigger eye because it is basically it looks better, but also because it's easier to clay an eye, a glass eye, when it is nice and tight to the foam area. So what I did was I fit my eye up there to make sure that it's going to fit properly. And then I took out anything that I needed, got the eye to fit right, and then I poked a hole in the middle for my clay to kind of sink into. And what I did was I took and I put some clay into my eye, and I did it to where it was flush so that I could actually pop my clay out and make a cone. Okay? And that, with that cone, I can stick that into this little hole here that I made, and that will help my eye stay in. Really, you don't have to worry about it too much. If you got this fit pretty tight, you really don't have to worry about your eye falling out. The clay will kind of suction cup into there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, set my eyes in there. Now when I set my eyes, I always like to put the bottom of my eye in first and make sure it's seated up against the foam. And then I will push the top in to a desired depth that I like. Now when I first do it, I'm just going to push it in, seat it, and I'm not worried about getting it all the way in yet, because I want to go ahead on this side, push in the bottom, and then go ahead and seat the top in. So after I get that done, the next step is to take a pin with a string on it. And what I did was I just tied the string around my pin. You see the strings. And I'm going to put it right in the center of my upper lip and push it in, and then make sure my string's seated right in the middle. And I'm going to take my string and put it up against the eyeball, the pupil. And then I'm going to bring it up, and I'm going to bring them together and make sure that they're the same depth into the eye socket. And as I'm looking at this, and they're perfect. A lot of times it doesn't come out that way. A lot of times you'll have the foam that the eye sits upon, one will be different than the other. That's pretty common. But this one was pretty good, so makes my job a little easier. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get some critter clay. On my clay, I like to use critter clay versus potter's clay. Potter's clay will shrink a lot. If you've ever done a clay pot or anything like that, and you go to fire it, you'll see how much potter clay shrinks. It's a lot. Critter clay does shrink, but not nearly the same amount. So you're pretty safe with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a decent sized roll of clay. And I always make a pretty long one because I want to be able to use it for both eyes. Now this is way more than I need, but I'll use it when I'm sculpting around the eye and everything as well. So there you go. It's not super big. It's definitely smaller than my pinky by quite a bit. So probably the size of a pencil, maybe a little less. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take, you can see I did a little point there. Now what I'm going to do is take that point, and I actually go, so if you were to think of an eyelid right here, this is where the eyelid's going to go, and it extends out in a straight line to the nose, and it actually goes right in, almost right in line with this crease here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put that right in line with my crease, just as a reference, and I'm going to push my finger in and smear that out, and that's going to allow my clay to hold in that place. So while I'm going around the eye with it, I don't have to worry about it coming loose. And I'm just going to bring my eye around, my clay around, and I'm going to essentially shape my eye, my eyelid. Now when you're doing this, you want to take in mind that you're going to put skin over this. So if you make it too bulky, you're going to end up with an eye that's too inset. Now if you do not enough, you're going to end up with an eye that's too bug-eyed. And I don't like that either. So I always kind of take that into consideration, because you're going to have skin laid up on top of the clay, and you're going to have a little skin tucked underneath, and that's all going to add bulk to your eye. So after I get it wrapped around, I'm just going to push that clay up into where what they call is the caruncle, or right around the nectating membrane. And I'm just going to push it in there, and I'm going to pinch this off. And I'm going to smooth it out. Now, obviously that's not what the corner of the eye will look like. We'll come back with the paintbrush and fix that. I'm going to get my clay a little wet, and I'm just using, in my water bottle, I got some Dawn dish soap, and I also have pine sol in it. Just a little bit of pine sol. So now we're going to come over here, and we're going to do the same on this side. So right where I want my eye to bend, I just put my finger there and bend the clay. That way, if I keep my finger there, I know where it's going to bend. And then I bring it up. I got a little more clay right on this side right now. I can tell that than I do this one. So we'll have to redistribute some of that clay. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my finger, and I want to push it up against the glass, and then slowly push the clay away from the eye. I'm pushing down and away. And I'm creating my eyelid. Like I said, you don't want too much, because you don't want your eye to look bug-eyed, or you don't want too little and have it look goofy as well. And when I have too much clay, it's pretty easy to get to remedy that by pushing down and away from the eye. And then you can just take the excess and pull it off. I'm going to go for, with this particular rug being an open mouth, I'm going to go for something that's semi squinty, but I also want to be able to see the eye just for the artistic effect of it. When a lot of the photos that I've seen, when a bear roars, which honestly a black bear usually does not open its mouth this wide. Usually it's what I call a slack jaw. But customers like this big open jaw. They think they look fierce and whatnot. So that's what we're going to do. So after I get my clay kind of where I want it, I'm going to take a paintbrush and I'm going to use that to shape my eye just by pushing it onto the glass and letting it slide up between the glass and the clay. And by doing that, I can manipulate the clay where I want it by lifting. I do like to get my eye pretty close to how it's going to be before I put the skin on there. I like my clay to be able to dry somewhat, so that when I slip the skin over it, it's not going to get distorted and messed up. I'm going to go ahead and take my paintbrush and kind of clean out this corner. And you can see that it's starting to get a good shape to it. A lot of times when I do the squinted look, I have to kind of get my clay on there a little bit wider than what I want it to look like. And then once I get the skin on there, I can manipulate the shape of my eye a little more. Because a squinted eye bear is kind of hard to get that skin tucked in. Right now he kind of looks a little pouty, more than fierce. I'm just going to open this back corner a little bit. And like I said, sometimes you got to get in there with a modeling tool and kind of redo things a little bit. So that's a little closer to what I'm going for. We'll come back and work on it a little bit more after we get this eye. I do like to make this crease here kind of deep. I think it really adds to the look of your mount and your eyes. I think it, I don't know, I've seen reference photos where they are kind of deep and I've seen some where they're not. So it's kind of just what you like in this case. I think just follow your reference. The one thing I don't like is on this particular eye here, I got like a little divot here. And so I'm going to just take a little bit of clay and fill that in. When you do that, make sure your clay is pretty moist so that you can stick it in there and smooth it out easily without messing with the rest of your eye. So I'm just going to roll out a little bit of clay. I'm going to guess how much I need, probably about that much. I'm just going to go ahead and stick that in there. And when I do this, I like to push it up against the glass and then up into the eyelid. Let me just kind of squirt it down. And just kind of blend it in. So I like the way those are looking. Next thing I'm going to do is work on my brow skin. And that's just up in here. I'm going to kind of find where that is in the form. I kind of carved it in already. It's pretty hard to see from the camera. Let me see if I can tip this to where it kind of creates a shadow. You can see right in here, there's a little ridge there. So I'm going to go ahead and I always try and bring that down past the actual brow. That way I can blend it in with a real nice transition. Now I find personally that this doesn't have to be blended in super well because I tend to mess with it when I get it mounted. But I do want both sides to be symmetrical. This clay is pretty hard already. It's starting to dry out pretty fast. Take my paintbrush and come in here and smooth it out. Shape it to where I want it. And that's kind of what I like. We can get more in depth if you want. It's one of those things where when you put that on there, you're going to end up messing with it anyways when you put your skin on. I kind of like to leave a little bit of a crease right here so that I can tuck my skin in there. Because what happens is when an animal growls or gets fierce, they wrinkle all these little muscles up and creates sometimes if it's a big bear like this, they'll roll their eyelid over and actually pinch the skin in there. Go ahead and do the bear's right side. I'm just going to start out again.